You ever wonder how fast your life can go from a steady road to a total wreck? Well, it only takes about 4 minutes and a bit of curiosity to see a truth you weren't even looking for. And my name is Marcus Hale. And not too long ago, my wife's brother decided to get in my face and lecture me about being a man and growing up. But the truth is, I'd already stepped into that role 3 weeks before he even opened his mouth. He just didn't have a clue what a real man looks like when he's carrying a secret that heavy, but he was about to find out, and so was everyone else. Let me take you back to Friday, February 11th, because that was the morning. Everything I thought I knew just evaporated, and Olivia had left her old phone plugged in at the house the night before, saying she needed to get some files backed up, and I came down the stairs around 7:20 in the morning to get my coffee going, and there it was, just sitting on the kitchen table, and I wasn't looking for trouble or trying to be a private eye, but I just reached out and grabbed it while my brain was still waking up, and since there wasn't a passcode, it just lit right up and showed me that the cloud had finished downloading everything overnight, and in 4 short minutes while I sat there in the quiet, my entire reality shifted into something I didn't recognize, and I started reading those messages, and I couldn't stop. See, for nearly a year, I'd been living out of a suitcase in Chicago, busting my tail to get our new company branch off the ground while my partner Brandon stayed back in Denver to handle the home office, and I thought I was out there building a future for me and my wife. But it turns out, Brandon and Olivia were building something else entirely right under my nose, and this wasn't just some guy. This was a man I trusted with my life who sat in the 3rd row of our wedding and literally shed tears because he said he'd never seen a couple more perfect for each other than us, and I sat at that table for over an hour and let my coffee get ice cold without even noticing because I was busy watching 11 months of lies unfold on a small screen. Then I heard her coming down the stairs at 8:30, just like she always does, and I had to tell myself to keep it together and not let a single thing show on my face because I wasn't ready to let the hammer fall yet, and she asked me why I was still home, and if I wanted a fresh pot of coffee, and she looked at me with that same soft smile she'd used for 4 years and asked what I wanted for dinner, and I just told her to surprise me and smiled right back, knowing that was the last time we'd ever have a normal conversation again. People think a guy in my shoes would just start breaking things and throwing clothes on the lawn, but that's not how I handled it. Because what I felt wasn't just anger, it was a deep kind of mourning for a person who was still standing right there in my kitchen. And for 3 weeks I played the part of the happy husband while I spent 15 minutes every single night sitting in my Ford F-150 in the dark driveway, just letting myself feel the weight of the betrayal before heading back inside to finish what I'd started, because I had work to do. Finally, it was a Sunday night during the hockey game when she sat me down and started crying, and I knew exactly what was coming, because she told me she'd made a mistake and had an affair with Brandon, but she called it a moment of weakness, which is a real joke when you consider a moment doesn't last 11 months, and then she dropped the real bomb that she was 3 months pregnant with his kid, and she'd known for 6 weeks already and was only telling me now because she'd run out of time to hide it 6 weeks. She had known about that baby while we sat across from each other at dinner, and she asked me about my day with that same sweet look on her face like nothing was wrong, and I just nodded and told her I needed some space to wrap my head around it all, which she took as a sign of weakness, but she had no idea I was just getting started. Then the whole cavalry arrived 4 days later with her mom, Patricia, and her brother Dominic, leading the charge, and even Aunt Evelyn showed up to eat my food and mess with my TV remote while they all sat there like a jury that hadn't even looked at the evidence, and Patricia tried the gentle approach telling me I was a good man and that the baby was innocent, which I agreed with, but I told her I just needed time to decide who I was going to be in this mess. Dominic was the worst of them, standing there with his big linebacker shoulders telling me I'd be a hero if I stayed, but a coward if I left, and that my whole legacy depended on me sucking it up and staying in a lie, and he said it like he was doing me a favor, but I just looked at him and then at Aunt Evelyn as she wiped cracker crumbs on my couch, and I realized none of them had a single clue what was actually happening. They didn't know I'd already been to see Victoria Kane, a lawyer who's probably forgotten more lies than most people tell in a lifetime, and she told me to stop talking and start digging through the books. So while they thought I was falling apart, I was actually upstairs in my office with a folder full of 22 instances where Brandon had been stealing from our company using the business cards for his own life. See, Brandon and I built Bodex Design Group from the dirt up starting as two guys tired of the grind back in 2017, and we built something real with a solid list of clients and a branch in Chicago that was absolutely killing it. And I was the one out there making it happen while Brandon stayed home, and apparently decided that my hard work was his personal piggy bank along with my marriage. So while that family sat in my living room thinking they were talking to a man at a crossroads, they were actually talking to a man who had already moved on and signed the papers and was just waiting for the clock to strike 12. And if you're still with me, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button and drop a comment, because the real game was about to begin. And it wasn't just about a divorce, it was about the business we built together. You ever wonder how much a man can take before he decides to stop being the hero everyone expects and starts being the one who actually survives? Well, I found out the hard way that loyalty is just a word people use until they find something they want more than your trust. And when I started digging into our business records, I wasn't just looking for mistakes. I was looking for the receipts of my own betrayal. And I found them hidden in plain sight as client entertainment charges for hotel rooms that Brandon was using while I was 1,000 miles away building a future he was busy throwing away. I knew every single dollar that moved through our accounts like the back of my hand. So when I sat down with years of paperwork, I found exactly what I was looking for, which were those recurring charges for nearly $200 a pop every single month for almost a year, and they all lined up perfectly with the days. Brandon said he was out of the office for meetings that never actually happened, and it turned out my business partner was billing his secret life with my wife to the company I was working myself to the bone to grow, and I printed out all 22 of those instances and filed them away in a folder labeled as a business audit, because that felt a lot cleaner than calling it the evidence that was about to end him. Back when we first started the company, our lawyer Arthur put a specific clause in our agreement that basically said if one partner was caught using the business for shady personal stuff, the other guy could just take the keys and walk away. And my lawyer Helen saw those hotel bills and told me I'd done enough detective work to bury him. And I didn't give Brandon the chance to lie to me or explain himself. I just sent those legal papers by certified mail on a random Thursday morning and let the silence do the talking, while he blew up my phone begging me not to destroy everything we built when he was the one who had already set it on fire. I walked away with the intellectual property, the big clients and the staff members who actually did the work, while Brandon was left with a company name that didn't mean anything anymore. And then I started meeting with her family one by one, because I wanted them to see the truth before the rumors started. And I met her mom, Patricia, first and just handed her the folder so she could see the dates where her daughter lied about where she was and the money she borrowed for car repairs that actually went toward a watch for another man. And I told her I wasn't trying to be mean, but she needed to know the whole story before she told me to just move on. And then I sat down with her brother Dominic, who tried to tell me that people just make mistakes under pressure, but I just pushed that folder across the table and told him the facts. Don't care about his opinions, and I watched his face change as the reality of what his sister had been doing finally started to sink in, and I just looked at him and said, "You told me to be a man, and that is exactly what I am doing." I told Dominic to take a real good look at that folder and tell me who it was that actually turned their back on this family, and he just sat there like a statue while I finished my coffee and headed for the door, because I did not need him to say he was sorry. I just needed him to know the truth, and I did not even waste my time meeting Aunt Evelyn for coffee. I just gave her a 6-minute phone call that left her gasping and saying, "Lord, have mercy," until I hung up, and then I just stepped back and let the facts do the rest of the work for me, because once that family saw the proof, they started hitting Olivia with questions she could not dodge, and that whole support system she thought she had just vanished into thin air while I was already living in a different zip code. The divorce finally wrapped up, and my lawyer Helen actually cracked a smile and told me I was the most disciplined guy she ever represented, and I launched Marcus Hale Creative with nothing but my own name on the door and no shady partners to worry about, and nearly every client I had ever worked with followed me over because they knew I was the one who actually got the job done, and within a few months I had a full staff and more work than I knew what to do with, while Brandon and Olivia were left stuck with each other and a baby boy named Caleb, and I genuinely hope that kid has a good life. But I hear the spark between his parents died out the moment they did not have a secret to keep anymore, because when you build a relationship on lies, you eventually have to wake up and look at the person who helped you tell them. Then, one Friday night in October, I was standing in my kitchen making fresh pasta from scratch, because that is apparently who I am now, and Patricia called me up to give me a real apology for how she had acted, and I told her it was fine, and that I just wanted her to have the full story, and it felt like a heavy weight finally dropped off my shoulders as we talked about normal things for a bit, and I realized right then that I do not even have the energy to hate Olivia anymore, because I left all that anger behind in my truck a long time ago, and the silence in my house did not feel empty. It just felt like it belonged to me. Everyone loves to tell you to be the bigger man, but I learned that does not mean you just let people walk all over you. It means you refuse to let their mess become your life, and you go out and build something they never saw coming. And Brandon got exactly what he earned, and Dominic learned a hard lesson, and Patricia finally got the truth she deserved. And I ended up with a life that was better than anything I could have imagined when I was sitting in the dark in my Ford F-15. Oh, but the most unexpected part of this whole deal is that I am actually glad she did it, because if she had not betrayed me, I would still be living a lie with a woman I did not really know and a partner who was robbing me blind. So in a weird way, she gave me the only thing I actually needed, which was my freedom.